Krabat by Ottfried Preußler, translated by Anthea Bell. Chapter 1. The Mill. It was between New Year's Day and Twelfth Night, and Krabat, who was 14 at the time, had joined forces with two other Wendish beggar boys. Also, His Most Serene Highness, the Elector of Saxony, had passed a law forbidding vagabonds to beg in His Most Serene Highness's land, but luckily the justices and those in authority would often turn a blind eye. The boys were going from village to village in the country around Hoyerswerda, dressed as the three kings from the east. They wore straw crowns on top of their caps, and one of them, little Lobosch from Maukendorf, who was playing the part of the king of the Moors, blackened his face with soot every morning. He walked proudly at the head of the little procession, bearing the Star of Bethlehem, which Krabat had nailed to a stick. When they came to a farm, they would put Lobosch in the middle and sing Hosanna to the Son of the David. Or rather, two of them would sing, while Krabat merely moved his lips silently, because his voice was breaking. The two other kings sang all the louder to make up for it. A good many farmers had killed a pig for the new year, and they would give the three kings from the east plenty of sausages and bacon. At other houses they got apples, nuts and prunes, and sometimes gingerbread and lardy cake, aniseed bars and cinnamon cookies. "Here's a good start to the year," said Lobosch, at the end of the third day. "I could go on this way till next New Year's Eve." Their Majesties, the other two kings, nodded solemnly and sighed. "We wouldn't mind that at all." They spent the next night in the hayloft of the smithy at Petershain, and it was there that Krabat dreamt his strange dream for the first time. There were 11 ravens sitting on a porch, looking directly at him. He saw an empty place down at the end of the perch, and on the left, and he heard a voice. It was a hoarse voice, and it seemed to be coming out of the thin air from very far away. And it called him by his name, but he did not dare reply. "Krabat," called the voice a second time, and then a third time. "Krabat." Then it said, "Come to the mill at Schwarzkolm, and you will not regret it." At these words the ravens rose from the perch, croaking, "Obey the voice of the master, obey." With that Krabat woke. What a strange dream, he thought, turning over and dropping off to sleep again. The next day he and his companions walked on, and when he happened to think of the ravens, he laughed. However, he dreamt the same dream again the next night. Once more the voice called him by his name, and once more the ravens croaked, "Obey." This set Krabat thinking, and the next morning he asked the farmer who had given them shelter for the night if he knew of a village called Schwarzkolm, or some such name. The farmer remembered hearing the name. "Schwarzkolm," he said reflectively. "Oh yes, it's in the forest of Hoyerswerda, on the road to Leipe. There's a village called Schwarzkolm there." The three kings spent the night in the barn in Großpartwitz, and then too Krabat dreamt his dream of the ravens, and the voice that seemed to be coming out of thin air. Everything happened just as before, and now he made up his mind to follow the voice. He crept out of the barn at daybreak, while his companions were still asleep. At the gate of the farmyard he met the servant girl going to the well. "Say goodbye to my two friends for me," he asked her. "I have to leave them now." At every village he came to, Krabat asked the way. The wind drove the falling snow into his face, and he kept having to stop and wipe his eyes. He got lost in the forest of Hoyerswerda, and took him a good 2 hours to find the road to Leipa again. So it was that he did not reach Journey's End until nearly evening. Schwarzkolm was like any other moorland village, with a long line of houses and barns on either side of the street, which was deep in snow. Plumes of smoke rose above the rooftops, and Krabat saw steaming middens and heard the lowing of the cattle. There were children skating on the duck pond and shouting with glee. Krabat looked around for a mill, but he could not see one. There was an old man carrying a bundle of sticks coming up the road, and Krabat asked him. "No, there's no mill in this village," he was told. "Is there one nearby?" "Oh, it's that one you mean." The old man jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "Back there in the fen of Kosel, by the Blackwater, there's a mill, but—" And he broke off, as though he had already said too much. Krabat thanked him and turned into the direction the old man had pointed. He had gone nearly only a few paces when he felt someone pluck him by the sleeve. When he looked around, it was the old man with the bundle of sticks again. "What is it?" Krabat asked. Coming closer and looking cautiously around, the old man said, "I just wanted to warn you, boy. Keep away from the Kosel fen. Keep away from the mill by the Blackwater. It's a queer place, that—" Krabat hesitated for a moment. Then he turned from the old man and went on his way out of the village. Dusk was gathering. He had to take great care not to stray from the path, and he was shivering with cold. When he turned his head, he saw lights begin to flicker in the village he had left behind. Here one, there another. Might it not be wiser to turn back? "Come," muttered Krabat, pulling up his collar. "I'm not a baby. It won't hurt just to take a look at the mill." For some time Krabat groped his way blindly through the wood, until he came upon an open space. As he was emerging from the trees, the clouds cleared away. The moon came through, and suddenly everything was flooded in cold moonlight. Then he saw the mill. It lay there before him, a hunched shape in the snow, dark and menacing, like some vicious, powerful animal lying wait for its prey. "I don't have to go there," thought Krabat. But then telling himself he was a coward, he plucked up his courage and stepped forward, out of the shadows of the wood. Striding boldly up to the mill, he found the door at the house closed and knocked. He knocked once, he knocked twice. There was no movement inside the house. No dog barked, no step creaked, no bundle of keys rattled, nothing. Krabat knocked for the third time so hard that it hurt his knuckles. All was quiet inside the mill. He tried the door handle, and the door opened. It was not even bolted. Krabat walked into the hall of the house. It was silent as the grave, and pitch dark, but right at the end of the passage there was a faint gleam of light, just a glimmer of a glimmer. "There's sure to be someone around if there's a light," said Krabat to himself. Arms outstretched, he groped his way forward. As he came closer, he saw the light was coming through a chink in the door at the end of the passage. Suddenly, full of curiosity, he crept up to the chink on tiptoe and peered through it. He saw a room lit by the light of a single candle. The room was all black, and the candle was red. It was stuck in a skull that lay on the table in the middle of the room. Behind the table sat a burly man in dark clothes. His face was very pale, white as a sheet, and he had a black patch over his left eye. A thick leather-bound book lay chained to the table in front of him, and he was reading this book. Suddenly he raised his head and gazed across the room, as if he had detected Krabat behind the chink in the door. His glaze froze the boy to the marrow of his bones. Krabat's eye, glued to the chink, began to itch, and then to stream, and his view of the room blurred. Krabat rubbed his eye. Then he felt a cold, icy hand placed on his shoulder from behind. The chill of it went right through his coat and his shirt. At the same time he heard a hoarse voice say, in the Wendish language, "So here you are." Krabat jumped. He knew that voice. When he turned around, he was facing the man with the patch over his eye. How had he got there? One thing was certain. He had not come through the door. The man, who was holding a candlestick in his hand, looked Krabat up and down in silence. Then, thrusting out his chin, he said, "I am the master of this mill, and you can be my apprentice if you like. I'm in need of one. Would you like that?" Krabat heard himself say, "Yes, I would." His voice sounded strange, as if it did not belong to him at all. "And what am I to teach you? How to grind grain, or the rest as well?" inquired the master miller. "The rest as well," said Krabat. The miller held out his left hand. "Done." At that very moment they shook hands. A muffled thudding and rumbling sound started up somewhere in the house. It seemed to come from the deep down. The floor quivered, the walls began to tremble, the beams and the door-posts shook. Krabat cried out and tried to run. All he wanted was to get away from this place, but the miller barred his way. "The mill!" he cried, cupping his hands around his mouth. "The mill is grinding again!"